Hello, I'm Linda Yueh, Chair of the Royal Commonwealth Society, and I am delighted to moderate this roundtable discussion on International Women's Day. As the oldest civil society organization dedicated to the Commonwealth, the Royal Commonwealth Society is committed to creating a world where all people are treated equally within their communities and before the law, regardless of their sex, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or other status. For almost a decade, the Society has sought to build sensitive dialogue among Commonwealth stakeholders around the need to protect the rights of LGBT+ people, women and girls, and other marginalized groups. We are pleased to convene this panel to discuss these important issues today. I am delighted to be joined by Nafesha Richardson, the coordinator for the Commonwealth Youth Gender and Equality Network, or SAIGEN, as it is known, and of which the Society is the proud secretariat. Nafesha joins us from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We're all jealous. We're also joined by Precious Ozemoya, SAIGEN's Gender and Governance Lead, who joins us from Nigeria. The envy is just going to continue. Melissa Fairey, a SAIGEN member, also joins us from Canada, another beautiful country. Firhaana Bulbulia, she's SAIGEN's Child and Early Forced Marriage Lead, and she joins us from Barbados. And finally, Geri Horner, one of our amazing ambassadors at the Royal Commonwealth Society. Welcome to you all. It is absolutely wonderful to have you all here on International Women's Day to highlight some of the fantastic new resources that SAIGEN has been developing to support young people in their efforts to achieve gender equality across the Commonwealth. Geri, if I can start with you. As a UN Goodwill Ambassador, you had done that role for many years previously. You've long advocated for gender equality and have spoken before about women's sexual and reproductive rights, particularly in the Global South. Why is gender equality such an important issue for you?
First of all, I want to say thank you, to be included in this among such amazing women, and to, I'm so inspired by what you do, and for us to come together, and that's the point, coming together and sharing experience and learning from each other. And my experience, when I worked for the United Nations, and it was on I would say, in a family member, the most difficult subject, reproductive health care. It's not the cozy subject. It's the hard one. It's the most contentious. It's about life. And it touchstones on religion, cultures, all of those get provoked and questioned. And I worked for 10 years learning and pushing boundaries together. And my feeling, the reason why it's so important is because it's empowering. It gives freedom for women to make the world a better place. And quite simply, when every gender is included, every culture is included, it makes the world a better place. That it's as simple as that. And that's what we want to do.
Wonderful message. Thank you so much, Geri. Nafesha, sexual and reproductive health and rights is one of the key thematic areas that SAIGEN and its network of young experts and leaders across the Commonwealth engage with. So could you tell us a bit more about the network and its other priorities?
SAIGEN was formed in 2015 on the margins of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Malta. Numerous youth advocates noticed a gap in the Commonwealth Youth Agenda for a network that actively promotes and supports the meaningful inclusion of youth voices on issues like gender equality, whether it's in the local, national, regional, or Commonwealth, or even international agendas. So these brilliant people, one of whom is Firhaana, who's here with us today, she was there in Malta. They identified 5 critical thematic areas referred to as the Gender 5. So that includes gender and governance, child early and forced marriage, sexual and reproductive health and rights, youth transitions in education, employment, and entrepreneurship, and sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sex characteristics, known as SOGESC. So over the years, SAIGEN has been using the Gender 5 as our foundation, and we've had numerous accomplishments, one of them being the Reform 53 campaign. But for 2022, we are really hoping to foster virtual collaboration among our members through a knowledge sharing hub, which you'll hear a lot about today. The SAIGEN Knowledge Sharing Hub will sort of act as a digital library. So we'll be hosting publications and other resources by our members. And this will support further capacity building within the network and also showcase a series of brilliant resources created to support SAIGEN members in our continued advocacy. So it will feature articles and blogs on topics like body positivity, highlighting women in Malawi, for instance, sports in SRHR, and how we can use sports as an innovative tool to improve young people's sexual and reproductive health rights and advocacy. And then there are longer, more thought piece resources. We have one on youth transitions in education and on employment. And then I would let the speakers here talk about theirs, but Firhaana, Melissa, and Precious have all put in a lot of work into creating their own resources. So what we will really see in the coming weeks is a facilitation of knowledge sharing and thought leadership, which is really critical for the work that we do in gender equality. And it's a really great opportunity as well to showcase the type of resource that SAIGEN members can produce.
What a wonderful set of resources to support young changemakers across the Commonwealth. And I should also add our thanks to the Australian government for supporting this knowledge sharing hub. So wonderful. Can't wait to delve into those resources in the hub. But let me turn to you, Precious. As the lead contributor of one of those resources, the Youth and Women Leadership Toolkit, could you tell us about this toolkit and why you believe it is so important for women and young people to lead on discussions about gender equality?
Thank you so much for the question. So the toolkit idea came because globally and even in the Commonwealth today, we still found that there is underrepresentation of youth voices in leadership and political participation, especially young women. So the idea came for us to have this capacity building material, which is the toolkit that any member can just go into and glance through to check for concepts, to check for things that they don't understand, and for that knowledge sharing so that they will be equipped, maximizing their potential in terms of leadership. And the toolkit has concept on leadership concept, human rights, fundraising, team working, so how to start a campaign, in terms of policy. So it's actually a rich resource that as members of SAIGEN and even any youth in the Commonwealth or young women can look into anytime to build themselves on this capacity. And it's very important that youth and young women voices are included, because most of the time we are the ones that face discrimination based on sex, based on age, based on our status. So our voices needs to be heard. We need to be the one to push them because we know exactly how this thing feels. And if we are to achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is what SAIGEN stands for, we need political will. We need support from our leaders. We need support from our partners to say, okay, these are youth, these are their voices, these are their issues. So how are we going to help them to drive this thing? So that this toolkit is actually so important for us as SAIGEN members to build our knowledge gap, so that in the upcoming months and years, we start seeing our members even with policy making, holding government accountable, starting up initiative, even in our work as advocates, in our activism, in terms of even generally in the life that we do to inspire others. So let's say in the short gap of, let's say, 5 years, 10 years, or how more, we can say, oh, this is SAIGEN. So members can stand up to say, yes, because of this toolkit, I learned this, I learned that, and I'm driving this change in my country. And then we're seeing improvement in terms of leadership is still okay. And the representation of youth voices has increased from this percent to this percent in my region, where I'm pushing for this. And because of me as a SAIGEN member, because of this material that I have access to and this knowledge, I'm able to foster that collaboration. So we are seeing a Commonwealth of youth, of young people who are leading change, of young women were like speaking up and making and driving that difference for social change so that we can achieve gender equality that we're pushing for. Thank you so much.
So inspiring. Thank you so much, Precious, and great to hear. I just want to bring Geri back in. So Geri, you've encountered these amazing young leaders through the Royal Commonwealth Society, and of course, in all the time that you were a UN Goodwill Ambassador, you will have come across young people leading efforts in their communities to achieve gender equality. Is there a particular experience from your time with the United Nations that stands out for you, and why?
My experience is that people don't like change. We're frightened of change. It's like, what? This is my land. This is my home. This is my values. You know, a fundamental. I think we're all pretty much like, if we're really honest. What I've learned is this: when we go into somebody else's country, they've lived a certain way for hundreds of years. For us, doesn't matter where we're from, to go in and start saying, you should be doing it like this, and you should be doing it like this, I don't want to be told. If someone came into no matter how I was living, no one likes to be told. And to respect that people have been with their religions, their cultures. And so how does really change for good happen? And my experience, change happens in a number of ways. One of the ways that happens, I think, is what the Commonwealth stands for, and that is community and friendship. It starts with friendship and trust. So when that trust and friendship is built slowly, you're going, you know, and that respect, you start sharing what we're doing, experience. And you're going, do you know what? This works for us. On that really grassroots level, this works for us. And then you're sharing, it might work for you too. That's one way it can happen, because otherwise you're treading on hundreds of years of culture. And I remember in Zambia, you know, so it was during the AIDS epidemic, and you had Catholic priests that don't believe in contraception. And so I witnessed there were mothers that were having no choice but to breastfeed their babies. They had HIV, but they had no other way to feed their babies. Right now, to go and then there was people dying of HIV at the time, to go and say to okay, you should be using condoms. Okay, that goes fundamentally against their religious beliefs of their culture at that time. To go in a hard line with hard policies, my experience, it doesn't work. The hand of friendship and communication and community, that's how on that grassroots, through the women, they get to decide what happens. That was one of the things that really makes change. And the other thing that I really believe, there's 3 ways that I've seen change happen, is education. 100% education. When you empower children, men, boys and girls through education, the shift happens. Because they're so filled up with knowledge and power, then they're not frightened of change. They're like, oh, okay, I see that. And I saw that, and I've seen it asked for. I think the youth make the change. They're not frightened of it. They demand it. I saw that in the Philippines. I went there, and this is another way that it's spotlight pressure. The generations, the young generation were demanding contraception. They wanted it. It's a Catholic country at the time, and with those kind of policies, and with no criticism, I went there and said, okay, this is what, giving them a voice for the voiceless, and really letting them be heard. And then spotlight pressure. The Philippines changed their policy. I don't know if they wanted to, but it was definitely a bit of spotlight pressure. So it can happen from different points. It's almost, from the youth, from the top, grass level, and from the top. It's both. But fundamentally, I do think it's education.
Thank you so much, Geri, for sharing that. And indeed, this Knowledge Hub is going to increase education, which is why we're also excited about it. And being online, it's going to be so accessible as well. So speaking of one of those educational pieces, Melissa, you are the author of SAIGEN, Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, Commonwealth Policy Review, another one of the resources that will be located on the new SAIGEN Digital Hub. So what are some of the top lines you can share from this review? And you also made some recommendations for improving women's sexual and reproductive health and rights in the Commonwealth. So please do share some of those with us as well.
Absolutely. So the review is meant to be at its core, a high-level resource in comparing sexual and reproductive health across the Commonwealth regions, but it's also a literature review, some qualitative interviews that were taken with youth across the Commonwealth, and most importantly, a call to action both to youth and to governments in the Commonwealth. So there were some key themes that emerged throughout the research and the literature review and in speaking directly with youth. The first that we heard was that a movement away from a solely family planning based model that doesn't take into account autonomy and choice is not preferred. So accessibility both to contraception and to abortion services, as well as sexual health education, should be at the forefront of both government policies itself and investments in grassroots youth organizations and youth movements. So similar to what Geri had mentioned in terms of, both a top-down and a bottom-up approach. The secondary theme was also that the focus on sexual reproductive health policies, they're often on women alone, leaving out those who, for example, are non-binary or transgender, and focusing solely on heteronormative education and practices. And this, from an education perspective, leaves out entire populations while missing out key intersectionality. It needs to be something that changes to ensure that sexual reproductive health rights are encompassing of entire populations and groups outside of just women. Lastly, a key theme before we go into some of the recommendations was that the interconnectivity and the impact on sexual reproductive health at a global level. An example can be seen in the now defunct global gag rule, which had implications for organizations and providers, especially linked to abortion and contraception services. But this was not only in the Commonwealth countries, but globally. This interconnectivity leaves, for example, I think a really important opportunity for the Commonwealth itself to have a really unifying impact on sexual reproductive health in their member states and to bring together some of these key recommendations that we've put together. In terms of some of the very important high-level meetings that takes place this year in the Commonwealth, I think the document's culmination of recommendations will be hopefully something that's considered. So the first being that there's no monolithic approach to policies and approaches across the Commonwealth, especially when it comes to sexual reproductive health rights. But we need to take into account the vast geographical, cultural differences amongst Commonwealth countries being really integral to an intersectional approach to advancing sexual and reproductive health rights. A second recommendation is that the Commonwealth really lacks a unified and member state ratified approach to sexual and reproductive health rights. So something that outlines a high level commitment of what the member countries will commit to. There's a potential option to utilize World Health Organization guidelines on sexual health or to develop Commonwealth-specific sexual health regulations and guidelines, but the importance on developing Commonwealth country-specific sexual health guidelines, it provides an opportunity for ratification and for a signal across Commonwealth member state countries that sexual reproductive health initiatives are a priority, not only to youth, but across the population. And by introducing those standardized and high-level guidelines, it allows for further opportunities for granting, program development, data research. It can be applied to youth across Commonwealth member state countries, but it also reduces that top-down stigma. Lastly, the recommendation is around developing and instituting comprehensive sexual health education that places youth at the forefront of grassroots and organizational movements. This includes providing leadership opportunities, for example, to youth with lived experience and experience in mobilization, and providing youth or just funding in general in order to for this to take place in a meaningful and transformative way across the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Great to hear. Thank you so much, Melissa. Geri, can I bring you in because obviously we've heard about your work on women's sexual and reproductive health rights in the Global South. So what did you find most striking in this report?
You know, we like to think that, you know, we're a modern world and we've moved on. I think the most shocking thing to know is that 800, you know, women are dying every day in childbirth. That's shocking, and that's still happening. Is that, you know, that's unbelievable in this day and age. And actually, it doesn't have to. That's the sad thing. I think it's sad. It doesn't have to happen. We live in a modern world, and I think we have enough resources to reach out to our sisters to say, you know, we've got your back. This doesn't have to happen. That, I think we can all feel very sad, actually, that's happening, isn't it? But the most encouraging thing is that I believe just listening to, you know, young people across the world, they're so inspiring, you know, and uplifting and want to be heard. And so actually, I feel 100% optimistic that, you know, our young people will give a voice for the voiceless. The change is going to happen. It's inevitable. It's not an if, it's a when. So actually, and the whole point is, the more we're honest about what is and accept it and see it, don't look the other way, look at it, I think that's when change is going to happen, and it will.
Thank you very much, Geri. I'd now like to bring in Firhaana. So as SAIGEN's lead on child and early forced marriage, can you tell me a bit more about this important issue in the Commonwealth and share with us some of the outcomes of the workshop that you recently organized on this topic?
Thank you, Linda. Child marriage is a critical issue within the Commonwealth. We know that approximately 60% of child marriages that occur globally happen within Commonwealth nations. And this disproportionately impacts girls, making it a deeply rooted gender inequality issue. I think particularly within the context of COVID-19, we saw how economic and social fallouts from the pandemic expanded these vulnerabilities and the risk factors for girls, particularly those living in poverty and those who didn't or had limited access to education and social protection programs. And this resulted in increased risk of child marriage. However, two things need to happen, or two things need to work together ultimately to end child marriage. And that the first being social change around discriminatory norms that dictate the roles of women and girls within society. So that is the first. And the second is a change in laws and policies on marriage, both legal and customary. And this too is a complex issue, which not only requires societal and political will, but also an enabling constitutional environment for prompt reforms to happen, which is not necessarily easy to navigate for Commonwealth countries, given our harsh colonial past, which did not create this type of legislative environment to see these reforms happen in a prompt manner. For us at SAIGEN, we felt it absolutely important to ensure that youth activists, grassroots activists, leaders within our own right have the capacity to lead on these type of issues. So in October 2021, we held a virtual workshop titled Ending Child Marriage in the Commonwealth, Advocating for Legal Reform and Social Change. And what we did is we brought together experts in the fields from all regions of the Commonwealth who have grappled with these type of issues and could share the lessons learned and tools for successful advocacy to drive the change that we want to see. And we had a great deal of interest in the workshop with registration from all corners of the Commonwealth. And one of the outcomes of the workshop was the publication of this workshop report, which will be hosted on the SAIGEN Knowledge Hub, which provides a detailed snapshot for those who are not able to attend, but also those who may be interested in replicating or building on this type of workshop. So it's definitely a useful resource for persons working within the space.
Thank you very much. really, I think anyone who's tuned in and does not check out the Knowledge Hub will absolutely be missing out. There's so much there, and it's so important. We are nearly out of time, but Nafesha, I do want to come to you about 2022 being a big year, and then I want to go around and just get final thoughts from this fantastic panel. So, but first, Nafesha, this year, 2022, is a big year for the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting will be held in Rwanda in June. The Commonwealth Games will be held in the UK in Birmingham in July and August. It's also the Platinum Jubilee year of the Society's patron and head of the Commonwealth, Her Majesty the Queen. So just tell us, what does 2022 have in store for SAIGEN?
2022 is really a year of opportunity, particularly for SAIGEN. We are seeing the world finally open back up, and it's a great chance for us to drive so much of the advocacy that we have been doing online to make it happen in person with all of the members of the Commonwealth. So first of all, and of course, we in the coming weeks will be really pushing the hub and building on the work that we have been doing with the hub. So when it's finally up and available, we will really ensure that we're making use of very important advocacy moments to ensure that the hub isn't just an online platform, but it's living and it's breathing, and the intended beneficiaries actually get to use it, and that it's influential for them. Then of course, SAIGEN internally, we are also looking to chart the future and seeing how we can strategize as a network. There are various opportunities for leadership to discuss and to plan. And so we're hoping to have a caucus to really plan the way forward, not just for 2022, but for a longer term plan, so that our goals and our achievements are, they're always looking down the line, and it's not just looking at the month or a couple months from now, what we can do. So that's for us internally. And then of course we have CYGEN happening in Kigali, which will be held under the theme, Delivering a Common Future, Connecting, Innovating, Transforming. And as we know, there are numerous forums that happen: the CYGEN meeting, the People's Forum, the Youth Forum, Women's Forum, and the Business Forum. And while we anticipate all, we are particularly excited for the Youth Forum, as SAIGEN will be part of the task force. So CYF 2022 really provides us an opportunity to influence decision makers and agree on actions that we can collectively take forward to achieve the ambitions for the Commonwealth. So we really look forward to that opportunity to ensure that gender equality is a key consideration, and it's at the forefront when we are discussing even broader issues like climate change and education and trade. So that's a little snapshot into our 2022 plan.
That sounds really exciting and also a lot of work. So congratulations on especially the strategic long-term thinking. That's so important to affect change, but how great to hear. And I'm sure we'll all look forward to following the exciting year of SAIGEN. Well, unfortunately, we're almost out of time for today's event. But before we conclude, I wanted just for all of us to reflect on today, International Women's Day. I'm going to ask each of you to briefly say what you believe is the single most important thing that young people can do to progress gender equality across the Commonwealth. So let's start with Precious.
I think that they should be committed. So we as young people, we should not stop or relent to driving that social change we want, which is gender equality. So with our resources, our potentials, with our advocacy, our activism, our network, with all we have, we should stay focused and committed to driving that goal. Yeah.
Firstly, I want to say I'm in the presence of amazing, inspiring young women, and thank you for sharing. And that really confirms, if we want to make the world a better place, gender equality is paramount. And how do we have power? Two things, I believe. United, we stand together in that, support each other. And then the most important thing is stand in truth. If you stand in truth, your words have power. Because when we see the truth, we come, okay, then we're like motivated to challenge things that don't fit, challenge the systems, challenge each other, our own beliefs. So I think the truth always prevails. I would say that.
Inspiring message. I guess for me, my suggestion for young people is to contribute to SAIGEN, get involved. Check out their work, come to the Royal Commonwealth Society website, you know, be the change you want to see.
That's lovely.
Paraphrasing Firhaana, who I think was paraphrasing Obama.
Amazing.
So thank you all. What a terrific and inspiring discussion, and on such an important issue, achieving gender equality and the role youth will play in doing so. And to all of you who've joined us, thank you so much for tuning in, for your support and interest in the Royal Commonwealth Society and in SAIGEN. We look forward to seeing you on a future occasion. And again, check out our website and SAIGEN, especially that Knowledge Hub. So thank you.